Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to have you here in person now. It's for me really exciting because it's the first talk I'm giving after 1.5 years, and with such a great panel, and with you here, and also with the great audience, which is hopefully looking now at the video online. Thank you so much. And I would really like to encourage everyone that we have got a vivid conversation. So we tried in the beginning to have this a bit different concept-wise. So we wanted to go in the audience, and the audience is coming here. But then on the other hand, we said, okay, with Corona restrictions, we cannot do this now. So maybe we still can somehow find the way that we can all engage and also take part in on this topic. I'm Corina, and I'm part of Fashion Revolution Germany and also part of the Fashion Open Studio team. And I'm very looking much forward to the talk about revolution. Will technology save us? If we look in history, what has changed with technology, you can also ask the question if technology caused the problems which we are facing right now. But today, we want to get inspired by these people here who actually use advantages of the modern technology to help changing the way we look at fashion. And before we start, I want to quickly introduce our speakers here. So on my left is Ursula de Castro, co-founder from the Fashion Revolution campaign, the world's largest fashion activism movement, which is driven by digital social media actions linked with offline events. It's happening right now in over 90 countries. She's also the author of the book Loved Clothes Last, and I don't know of how many other things which she initiated. And the second speaker is Sophie Tendai Christians. She's the advisory board member of Fashion Revolution Zimbabwe, and that's how she came here, because we are linked to each other. And then we found out that she is incidentally in Berlin, and we asked her to be part of our panel. She's the co-founder of Zone Africa, the circular and regenerative design and education center in Africa. And besides her is Dr. Monika Haug. She's the founder of Repair Rebels, a digital craft startup. And with her venture, she wants to make fashion repairs as easy as online shopping. And next to her, last but not least, I would like to introduce Dr. Carsten Pufal. He is a postdoctoral researcher and project leader at the Institute of Optics and Atomics Physics at Technical University Berlin. So for each of our speakers, technology plays an important role in their daily work, and I'm really curious to know more about how this is working. Ursula, when you started the Fashion Revolution campaign, were you aware of the power you could unleash with the global fashion activism and the digitalization through the social media?
Really, no. So I'm a crochet lady, and I make clothes, and everything for me was about hands and technology. I probably even refrained from pressing buttons at the time. But social media, I was always curious. I diarized it. It's a way of communicating, and I am an arch communicator. And so when Fashion Revolution started, we knew that obviously we had to get in with the times and stop being so granny and just get in with technology. It was weird. I mean, there was like a room full of adults and we were discussing hashtags. It felt a little bit like Monty Python. But nevertheless, for us, social media was 100% what drove us as an organization. And I have to say that everything that we've done has been this mixture between very instinctive, very old, very felt, but married with what we can use right now. We couldn't run a 90-team organization if we weren't connected with buttons and waves. We couldn't get the information from our followers if that's not how we were communicating. The Fashion Transparency Index is all mixing ancient, instincts with very modern technology. So for us, it's been pivotal, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later, but I think that it has a huge role in bringing back things that potentially we may think we have forgotten, and technology will be a new way of remembering that we know them.
Wow, yeah. That's also what I so much appreciate about the Fashion Revolution campaign, that it links people from all over the globe. It doesn't matter where you go. If you go in a country, you have a look online, where is there the head of Fashion Revolution, and then you're in the scene already. It's amazing how this power has such a power, and also gives a face to the workers behind the products. It's through social media it's possible that we link each other together. And that's how, as I said already before, that's how Sophie joined here. And my question is to you now. How are you connected to technology? Can technology transform societies to become more sustainable? What do you think?
I mean, I'm an optimist, hopefully. We were talking about optimism and pessimism earlier. But I also think that boils down to what we perceive technology is and how we define it. And if you kind of deduce it to the simplest definition of the term, of it being a way to use different knowledge systems to create a solution to a problem, then yes. And I speak purely from my context, which is Zimbabwe. I refrain from speaking about Africa as a monolith because it's not, but 60% of the world is still offline right now. So digital technologies, specifically from my context, they are very useful to some people, but not to everybody. And biotech and different types of technologies are also not accessible to the whole population. But then if you look at what's happening on the ground in communities, I mean, there's a huge circular movement of, okay, how do we make products circular? How do we make things regenerative? How do we upcycle, how do we recycle, and how do we go beyond that? And there's a lot of communities that have been doing these practices for years, for different reasons. One of them being poverty, one of them being that they've just learned it from their grandmother, who's learned it from their grandmother, who's learned it from their grandmother, and they know how to regenerate items. So the concept of waste is minimal, and if we start looking at technologies or those knowledge systems as technologies, then for sure, I definitely think that it's a way forward. But we can't dismiss them as technologies purely because they're not coming from a mechanized process, or they're not coming from an industrialized process, or they're not coming from a formal education system. They're coming from communities that are sustaining themselves on a day-to-day basis. So if we can kind of reconceptualize how we look at technology, I think that's a way to make it more inclusive, and I think it's a huge way forward. And that's where my optimism comes from in that sense. So, I mean, for now I say yes, but purely from that perspective.
And is the Fashion Revolution campaign helping you in that, the communities around?
It is. It's connected us with a lot of designers that do have access to digital platforms. Specifically Instagram, which has been a whirlwind for a lot of businesses. And these businesses are connected to the local communities. So in that sense, we learn through different brands like, I'm sure a lot of Zimbabweans in the audience will recognize, like House of Stone. She, Denai is a great designer, and she works with traditional forms of creating things, and she works with local communities, and she connects those systems together. And we know her through Fashion Revolution because she's a part of Fashion Revolution. So it's connected us to those systems too, even though a lot of the communities that have connected us through Fashion Revolution aren't necessarily online. So it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, great. And Monica, you have set up a digital platform, Repair Rebels, which helps to connect also the people. And at Repair Rebels, you can order your clothing repairs online and make it as easy as online shopping experience. How do you want to achieve this? And on which point are you right now?
So maybe taking one step back, the reason why we decided to find Repair Rebels was really because we realized that fashion industry doesn't use technology that much, right? I think we have to admit that there are more people on the planet who have cell phones but don't have access to sanitation. We are at the stage where we are exploiting or exploring space travel, but we're still producing clothes the way we were doing 100 years ago, right?
100%.
So I think technology has always been there, but fashion industry was just not using it in the way maybe it could have been doing it, right? And being part of Fashion Revolution movement, I'm representing Düsseldorf for over 4 years already. So really being part of this family, this huge family, and I think also thanks to Ursula and Carrie. So I think it was not the technology which made the movement spread around. It was really the business model you took, because you were really open about it, right? You put all the resources online. And I remember the way we started in Düsseldorf. It was my friend who was a banker and me still a researcher. And we were like, OK, let's put Fashion Revolution event together. And we're like, OK, let's design a poster. How do we design a poster? And of course, it was fantastic because you had all the resources there, digital resources there. We could just take it, download it, and use it. And that made a lot of things more easy. And I think this approach, the open source approach, was the #1 reason why the movement spread around so fast. Of course, it was facilitated by technology. So one thing to Fashion Revolution, really being inspired and taken by that movement, I realized that fashion industry is really lacking behind when it comes to innovation. And really looking at the repair industry, you could really see that the repair industry is one of the few industries which are completely not digital. So they are run, the local repair shops are run by immigrant people who don't even use emails, who are hard to find on Google, who don't even have a website. And like Ursula says, the most sustainable garment is the one that you already own. I truly believe and live this, ethos, right? But it's so difficult to repair clothing, right? If you haven't learned that at school, if you don't have a grandma or your mom who could do it for you, right? And you're living a busy modern life, it's way easier to buy something new. First of all, it's very cheap to buy new, but also it is very, very easy to buy new. And this is our motivation. We said we want to make repairing clothes as easy as buying new, because only so we can motivate people to repair more. It's a big ambition because, like I said, we are fighting 2 wars, one on the consumer side, trying to tell them, OK, even if it's so easy and so cheap to buy new, maybe it's better to repair, which is hard to convince the consumers. And still, we have a lot of people who go on our platform and they open their eyes like, are you serious to charge these prices? I was like, hello, we are in Germany. It takes 2 hours to repair your garment. And they, oh, OK. On the other side, another war, like I mentioned, is really the local repair shops because, they are not digital. Those people are scared of internet and they don't want to do anything. They don't want to have to do anything with internet. So you really need to teach them, and you really need to go them, talk to them, explain them, and take them with you. But it's a great job. I think it's really worth pushing it, and we're learning every day because there's still a lot to learn in this market, and this drives us.
Yeah, amazing. So everyone in Düsseldorf can use the platform, or how is it built? Is it an app also linked to that, or is this future music? You're not at this stage right now.
So we are actually this week testing our prototype. We are already taking repairs over WhatsApp. So a lot of people contact us over social media, over WhatsApp, and we are launching in Düsseldorf, and we are planning to go to all the bigger German cities. Because,
amazing.
You need to scale the solution. And I think our ambition is to build a case for Düsseldorf, an efficient repair city, and then, replicate it in other locations.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, so we have the repair topic on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have all the material which is already existing on the planet. And now I want to zoom a bit in and go more into the direction of R&D and textiles. Carsten, in your current research, you're focusing on sorting methods for closed-loop textile recycling, and for example, by artificial intelligence. What change can we expect in the near future to happen in technology and innovation?
Big question, I would say. You never want, as a researcher, you never want to overpromise. So, but I think we're facing, like at least in the EU, it's in 4 years there's going to be a big wave of textiles coming in, and on the waste side because there's a new EU directive. So, and hopefully these collecting textiles, which has been a very German discipline, so it's not very common in the EU. So like we have like 65% collection rate in Germany and like 20 or 30% in the EU. So that will hopefully change, but there will also the industry has to transform because there's like right now it's about picking the best parts of that huge waste stream and selling it as second-hand, and exporting or shredding the rest and putting it into car seats and into wiping cloth. But once you have more of these, this whole business model has to change because the second-hand market cannot uptake all that many garments. So we have two sub-projects we're facing on. So one faces on that second-hand part. That means using artificial intelligence. I know that's a big topic, it's a big name. So it's computer vision. We're trying to implement methods that analyze textiles or garments and finding a more objective way to sort them into very fine-grained categories so that we can finally or hopefully advertise them to very specific customer groups. So now it's not only about brands, but also about not only wedding dresses, but like floral dresses or certain types of T-shirts. So many more categories that you could sort by hand. So that's one project, and the other project is that takes care of the textile waste, so something that cannot be reused again. And there we're using spectroscopic methods to find out the material compositions of garments to find the suitable recycling channels, because unfortunately all these polymers that are used, you cannot mix them, they don't mix, so you have to put them into different fractions before you can finally use fiber-to-fiber recycling, which has very high restrictions on the feedstock to make new yarn out of it, which you can then use for new garments.
Mm-hmm. So that sounds really interesting. The question is also, how can we use it? No, how is the system developing? Because we have so much waste, so much material, and the people they need to change also their behavior, I think. Are you positive about the future in this direction, that these technologies can help us to solve the problems which we have?
Not sure. Yeah. So at least I can say that technology alone will not do it. So that's when I first read the title that you sent me. There's like, is technology going to save us? I was immediately, no, it's not going to save us, for sure not, because as you said, technology brought us all these problems of exploiting resources, exploiting the planet, and in the first place. So it has been the tool to do all this. So why should it just turn around and do the opposite now? So I think that's unrealistic. But so the technology is, I think it's a tool that society or civil society can use, and we can make good use out of it and we can make bad use of it. That doesn't mean that technology is always neutral. I mean, there's definitely bad technology, and there's technology that has a bad purpose in mind, but it's up to society how to make use of it. And so that's where the campaigns like these come into place. And well, I think the overall consumption has to go down. It's not only that recycling. Now, once we have this the circularity system, and then we can consume as much as we want. That's not going to happen.
Never going to happen. Absolutely, I really couldn't agree more. So there is this kind of panacea that, you know, everything will be recycled at some point, but anything that is born of excess will have a massive, footprint. So it is really about slowing down first, and then, I mean, for me, technology is, again, we invented it, so why should it save us or put us into further danger in many ways? But there is a risk that we inject things that we don't really understand, and so we don't really know how we will be saved or maimed by it. So for me, technology, what's interesting right now is that connects us to who we are. You know, when I speak about the Fashion Transparency Index, this idea of having traceability, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, these were connections we made without the use of technology. I mean, we knew that, you know, if you bought a pair of Converse, they had to be made in the USA, or they weren't Converse. And same with wool coming from Italy, and tailoring, though, being in the UK. So this understanding of our supply chain, it's something that we've lost. We've gigantified. And technology, in many ways, is going to help us to map it. But it's nevertheless our curiosity that needs to create that map and the reason for that map to be in existence. However, going back to Monica, and we could be on a repair, you know, love fest here for, you know, a good few days. But this is what interests me, to use technology in ways that, you know, they make us remember things that we already knew. And in that sense, I feel that we can really make big changes with small art, but always with the understanding that it's something that we need to tailor to us and tailor to a good use rather than a negative use, because it's so plain that we've done them both. And I've been, you know, in this, particularly this repair conversation, I've been begging every single fast fashion store to put cheap and affordable repair stations in those stores. So anyone that's watched a talk of mine will know I'm doing it again. Primark, Zalando, Boohoo, Topshop's gone, but H&M, Zara, repair stations in your stores, available, as affordable as the cheap clothes that they produce. But that's just the end. At the very beginning, it's slowing down and paying your workers and respecting the supply chain.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's really about changing the business model.
Of
right?
course.
It's not about technology, it's really about the business model. The same thing with transparency. You know, we need fashion brands to want to be transparent, right?
Yeah.
Fashion industry is a very secretive industry. I met so many even sustainable fashion brands here at the fairs a few years ago who would not like to tell me where are they producing because they are scared or other reasons, right? So really the industry needs to want it. And then we can use technology, which can be a powerful tool. The same with repairs. I mean, the industry doesn't want that. I mean, we've been approaching social media influencers asking to support a campaign, and we've been told very honestly, we are living from selling, not from repairing, you know? So that's really, you know, we are against the classical business model.
Absolutely, and in fact, I recently put a post on Instagram, probably the one that was the most controversial of anything I've ever done, but so for me, when people say, I support, you know, garment workers, but their product is shit and fast fashion, you might as well just throw it in the bin. This has been one of the most dangerous narratives that we've been, you know, perpetrating for the last 25 years. And disrespectful to the people who make our clothes. The fast fashion brands have been swimming in joy each time we say don't repair. And at the end of the day, everything ought to be repairable. And, you know, it goes back to knowledge. And technology can help us with that knowledge. I mean, I tell everybody, whenever you buy something, turn it around, pull any string that's, you know, falling apart, and see how products are being made. And I do believe that, you know, that really showing and leading by example and making repair available everywhere is really, very important, as is learning from those places in the world that haven't lost it. Because in India, for instance, in Africa, again, I'm sorry, I'm speaking, generalizing here, in Southeast Asia, the mending is still, really autochthonous to the communities. And it's us that have lost it and need to technologize it back into our lives.
Yeah, and also going back to the beginning, because like you said, repairing is an important part of the process, but looking at the beginning of that process and being like, I mean, you see a lot of brands right now where recycling and upcycling and all the bicycle formed of restoration has become their brand. So it's, we upcycle, we do this, which is great, but it's one part of the problem, and we have to look at, okay, well, how do we move towards an ecosystem in a way where we don't need to recycle, we don't need to upcycle, or that becomes inherent, where waste isn't the predominant issue, but it's just a part of our ecosystem. We hear over and over, waste is a design flaw. But we can keep saying this, and we can keep saying this, but if we don't start using technology, or we don't start adapting our design process in a way where we constantly have to figure out new ways to recycle, as opposed to knowing what that recycling process is going to be when we design the product in the first place, then it's going to be a very long road. So that's just something that we need to inherently start focusing on too, is how do we start from the beginning? How do we design products? How do we innovate products where planned obsolescence isn't inevitable? Like, it's not inevitable. It's not going to automatically become a waste product in 20 years or 30 years, even if it is a durable item.
Or 5 minutes.
Or 5 minutes, exactly. So that's also an important part of the solution and the things that we need to start thinking about.
Or by the time, you sell something. I think it's really extended producer responsibility. Because again, the industry was built so sell as much as possible, produce as cheap as possible. Once you sold it, then you tell the consumer that you should feel bad 2 months later that you don't have the new thing, and then again sell as much as possible and make the consumer feel bad about it. So once the brands will be responsible for what happens with the products, once they will be maybe even taxed for producing waste which don't decay for years, then we're going to have a change. So really the business logic needs to change, and it's a very harsh change. I think for this reason, we see when we talk about innovation in the fashion industry that it doesn't come from the fashion brands, it comes from outsiders, It's
Or from emerging brands.
Emerging brands, but not the typical fashion players, because it's hard. I mean, we really need to change the game.
Yeah, I think I'd like to step in with the at the point of repairs, and I think if you compare all other technology that you have, you buy it and you have a warranty, and if it has a design flaw, that company pays for it. So maybe you need that repair store, because then if a product has been made in a way that it falls apart after half a year, then that company has that feedback that this product has been bad. And because now they can just push it into the market and it's gone. And they don't have to care how long it's going to last and how it can be recycled. All these things are just out of the scope. There's no incentive to do it. So I think
and there is actually less transparency on that side of the supply chain than there is, at least some steps are being done with the Fashion Transparency Index. When it comes to products and the way that they end up, technologically, there was a program in Italy that actually put a microchip in second-hand clothing to try and analyze actually what happens to second-hand clothing. And, the reality was that half went the usual way, so the second-hand store and then being sold, but a great half went through the mafia and were littered in south of Italy, without any form of regulation whatsoever. And, we really struggle to follow the case of the clothes once we throw them. That's why I think, the technology particularly in this case, we need to think about longevity, what we can actually do as people before we rely on the kind of technological.
Yeah, that's also about raising awareness, no? What the Fashion Revolution campaign and through also the digital media that is possible right now, that we can share this knowledge and everyone everywhere in the world can read it.
I had one question to Carsten. How much of the sorting is being done by hand and by the machines?
All of it is done by hand.
Okay.
So far.
Yeah.
There is no channel that brings it reliably to fiber to fiber recycling, because it's just that whole business model is not yet set up. So this will evolve over the next years. But so far everything that you throw in the container is taken by humans and then sorted into different fractions. The waste has been taken out because there's a lot of waste in it, and it's all human labor.
When do you think it's going to change, or are there enough technology?
I always say that we're planning on a semi-automatic system, so it will always involve humans, because that is like a textile is from the morphology is. It's not, no machine can so far unfold it, and it's just very difficult. And humans are quite good in unfolding and looking at textiles, and they can say, okay, this smells a bit bad, this is wet, this is stained, so this is something the machine is very difficult for it to do. So there will always be humans involved, I think.
Again, a massive labor which we as consumers are not aware of.
Yeah, and also material-wise, the materials which are existing now, they don't have the same quality. So the question is also what happens after the sorting out. So it should be sorted out, but then it's so mixed up, the fibers. How can you dismantle it, or what is the way? The end of the fabric after the sorting, no?
And in addition to that, it goes past the sorting process, because a lot of these clothes do end up in landfill. And that brings a whole new element to the problem, because if you see, I mean, there's not a lot of statistics of how much clothing countries like Zimbabwe import on a daily basis, but they don't end up in separate landfills. So it's not a landfill that's just clothing, it's a landfill that will be e-waste, it will be food waste, it will be plastic waste. So then if you're starting to look towards landfill, which is also a problem that we need to start addressing as an industry as a whole, and being like, okay, how can we create solutions? How can we upcycle, for example, things from landfills, or how can we use landfills as a resource? That becomes almost impossible, because it's not just the textiles and the polymers, it's also all of the extra parts from the waste ecosystem that become an issue. So then that's also something that we have to start thinking about. And that makes it slightly or greatly more complex, unfortunately.
And it's language too. So in Italy, for instance, and in many other places, the minute something is labeled waste, it cannot be reused, because it could be toxic, So it's also a question of really reframing how we see the things that we abandon. I mean, I love working with designers, they call things found. So it's no longer waste, it's found. And that, these linguistic changes of perceptions make people think and feel differently over what they're looking. I mean, I see a future of trash couture of the most exciting kind. I see young designers all over the world picking, making, and looking way better than Cinderella ever did when she went to the ball. So I know that there is a creativity and an instinctive, and I go back to that instinct thing, an instinctive feel of both love and intelligence when you find something, It sparkles, it grabs your eye, and then you've already reprocessed it in your mind, and that's not necessarily technological, but technological could be the finding of it. Technological could be the instructions on how other people can do the same, and technological can be the selling and the spreading of it. But it does need to be linked back to a fundamental instinct. In this case, it's that of picking up, and that of mending and repairing, which we learned how to do just about 1 nanosecond after we learned how to make, I'm sure we learned how to repair.
Yeah. So I would like to open now the discussion a bit also to our audience and maybe also to our digital audience, because we have also the live stream. I don't know if there came in some question over the comments online, or maybe here in our audience. Do you have some questions to our panelists? Or is all clear to you? Or maybe you want to add something here in the front?
Thank you so much for being here. It's an honor. Do you think the waste of clothing in general will be quite as much as the waste of masks? And what do you think this global pandemic is teaching us as a fashion industry? Yeah.
I think the waste of masks is going to be a problem. I'm kind of thinking they're so horrible. I've been thinking, why am I not walking around with a thing of felt tips so that at least I can draw on them, because they're so boring. So tomorrow I think I'm going to buy some felt tips and start drawing. That'll make me want to keep them more. But it's difficult to generalize with the pandemic because, I mean, for me, it's been like another Rana Plaza, you know, where humanity's shame is visible. And in this case, it's not humanity's in particular. I'm referring to fashion brands. But it has been a profoundly unequal time. And that, for me, has been where it's been more painful. So hopefully, when it comes to clothing, it's definitely shown us that we've got way too much. But when it comes to each other, I hope that it's shown us that we really need to think of each other as equals. You know, there's never been a time in which it's been, even in the same block of flats, different circumstances have hit different people. And so that this is, I guess, the first lesson. Really, when it comes to clothing, one interesting statistic is that when the UK reopened stores, charity shops did their best business ever. So something around this awareness did pass, something around the we have too much or we need to keep things longer and sharing and swapping, something did pass, which I took as a positive.
I kind of, just going off of your question too, sorry.
Yep.
Anyway, I feel like our response to masks has also been similar to our response to clothing in terms of we've had a problem, there's a solution, which was, you know, there's a virus spreading and we need to cover our faces. But we've never really thought of, from the get-go, how are we going to deal with the masks afterwards? Exactly. So we're inherently short-term thinking. And that's what we do with a lot of things. We see it in politics, we see it in general policy, we see it everywhere. We think, okay, well, there's trends that we need to chase, and there's these people, there's a demand over here, and there's a demand over here, and it's very short term, but it's not, okay, what do we do when the demand changes and the trends change, etc. And the same with masks. We really need masks now, but hopefully in 2 years or a year, I wouldn't say any sooner because that's not the reality, we're not going to need masks anymore. But we didn't think of that from the beginning. So I think it's more of an indication of, okay, what are the things that we need to start thinking of from the beginning, even if we don't have the solution. But if we'd had a centralized area where we could collect face masks from the get-go that are no longer being used, and then once the solution isn't, once we have the solution, it's mobilized. And how can we do that with the fashion industry? So it's a similar parallel problem where it's just that our thinking has to shift, and the way we approach problems has to shift to being less short-term and more long-term.
Totally agree.
Are there any other questions?
I
see your hand raised in the back. 2, 3. Oh, there are a lot of questions. We have to hurry up because I think we have just 10 more minutes.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Diane.
Yeah.
My question was for the repairing platform. How exactly does it work? Because a client makes an appointment, you schedule it, you have workers that do the repair, they send it back, or how does it work? And what's like the hourly rate of that? How does it justify the, it works of course with luxury garments, but fast garments, I don't understand how that could possibly work.
So what we are trying to do, and we're really learning by doing, we are trying to standardize the repair process, which is extremely hard because every repair obviously is different and machines will never be able to repair, at least I think not until I'm alive. So we've been doing a lot of interviews with repair shop owners. We've been doing a lot of customer interviews. I've been repairing my stuff all my life. So we selected a number of categories which should be standardized. Like I said, we are currently testing our prototype. I was very happy. Our tester said it was just as buying at Amazon. I was like, okay, so maybe we're moving in the right direction. So standard repairs, you would be booking it online, but then more complicated repairs, you would send a request by sending your pictures. And then we would contact an appropriate repair provider. So at least in Düsseldorf, we have about 20 people who work with them. And we know this lady loves darning, and the other lady loves fixing jeans, and this guy loves fixing designer bags. So by this internal knowledge, we can really then contact them and then connect them with the consumer and try to facilitate the repair. In Düsseldorf, we also offer door-to-door delivery, so really trying to be super convenient to say, okay, you just need to click 4 clicks and you're going to have your garment repaired. So we're trying to make it as easy as possible for people to buy. When it comes to prices, it's very difficult because we typically add an extra because the prices for repairs are very different. Every shop charges different prices, so there's no standard pricing yet. But again, we're working with the industry and we're learning every day, and yeah, still a lot to learn.
Thank you.
Welcome.
There's one question from the online forum.
Two, but I will start with a question from Julia. She wants to know, do you see potential in augmented reality for sustainable fashion?
I guess this question is maybe linked to Carsten or Ursula. Do you want to add something to that?
The most exciting thing I've seen recently, actually, is virtual clothes.
Yeah.
And, again, I go back to this technology that reminds me of when I was little and I was cutting those paper dolls' dresses and putting them on cardboard. I mean, the idea that I could do myself virtually, do myself up completely, wear, whatever, I find really, really interesting. And I think that if we allow the playful element of, and we allow our, preconceptions of how to wear clothes, I mean, at this point, half the time, people wear clothes to be seen in a photograph. So bring it on. I mean, so that there is an element, I think, of technology that fashion can use if we focus on that, playful and that element.
So I know a bit of work from academia that work with what's called virtual tryons. So that's like making a photo, a video of yourself, and then trying on different clothes virtually. I'm not sure if that's going to have a positive impact on sustainability. It might return the return rates of e-commerce, so nothing or less has been shipped back because you know better whether it suits you or not. But I'm a bit skeptical there.
But I think digital fashion maybe helps us to see fashion as art and less as a consumable goods. And also, I have to agree, I have an 11-year-old daughter, and she convinced me to play Roblox with her. And she said, okay, Mom, let's get some outfits. And I have to be honest, I really spent quite some money because she got an avatar for me and for herself. And I was like, okay, that was a fun experience. Yeah. So maybe we can get this kick from enjoying fashion online and playing with fashion online. And I think there, really, the creativity will be thriving, not the people who have the cheapest prices.
But I think for the, a case in point for the young fashion open studio designers who, sometimes we know the fashion industry is, monopolized by, oligopolized by a few brands that have an absolute, they've invaded every single possible space, making very difficult for our cohort, for instance, to really find, their customers and their audience. So I wonder for them, for the more creative ones, the idea that they can sell something very real, very made, very beautiful, but at the same time go completely wild and bonkers and sell something that doesn't actually exist. But it is nevertheless a fruit of their design signature and their, creativity. In that sense, I think it's interesting. But I do agree with you. I've seen a lot of stories around, diminishing returns, trying on, the sampling, and I don't necessarily feel that we're there in a consistent way yet.
Yeah, one more question from the audience.
It's about digital fashion. Is digital fashion going to slow down production or instead adding up a new product category for brands to exploit?
Depends on the brands. I mean, for some brands, it will always be an addition. I mean, we are seeing mainstream brands now, they will be making money from secondhand. I mean, that's the mentality, as Monica was saying. Switch the mentality and maybe it'll be, a different way of experiencing fashion. But while business is exclusively about growth and scale, then we've got no chance. I mean, one of the things that I think, I'm going to say it now, but Fashion Revolution does believe in a fashion industry that conserves and restores the environment and values people over profit and growth. I think with that mentality, we can start moving forward with digital, with all sorts. But without that mentality, then everything is going to be for the growth and the money.
Yeah. So that's a good ending word already, but we have 2 more minutes and maybe one more question to answer because I see some more hand raisings. I don't know if we make every, but maybe over there.
Now is 21st century, and it is the future, and gives it more vintage clothing and high-tech clothing it is, and vintage clothing and some or many vintage clothing.
I didn't really get the question, but I think it was if it's more vintage clothing in regards of new clothing.
No, and dandy-like.
Okay, so I think
perhaps if vintage clothing is the future, is kind of what I understood, that we're moving away from new clothing and we're moving more towards the notion of vintage. Is that kind of...
Or negative connotation with vintage.
Maybe I can speak for the recycling industry, that vintage is quite interesting for them to pick out of this waste stream, because it can be sold like within, let's say, Germany at quite high prices. So there's quite an interest in keeping these old, very specific garments.
Karsten, maybe my question to you, because now the resale platforms are booming and more people are reselling clothing instead of putting them in the bin. How do you think it will affect the recycling industry?
Difficult question. I think we did a bit of data science on second-hand platforms, and I was shocked how many new clothes there are. So different categories. They have usually and it was, I think, like 30% of the clothes has never been used, and half of that has still the hang tag. So that is, I was shocked when I saw this. I thought, okay, it would be used clothes, but it's actually new clothes that they offer. So
we just need to keep. I mean, it's not highly technological, but it's the only way
Easier
really to start. Let's just keep things.
And I think just because we see an increase of the resale of clothing doesn't mean that there isn't a huge problem, because there's still huge exportation of clothing and dumping of clothing that complements it. So if anything, the danger is that the resale industry or the resale market may also contribute or exacerbate that problem, where more clothing is dumped because there's just an extra demand, so there's a bigger market, and then it's just a never-ending cycle. So I don't think that we should necessarily always see there being a resale market as a positive thing, because that doesn't mean that there isn't all of the negatives that surround it. It just means that we've shifted our eye away from it, which is also quite sad.
There was one more hand raising over there, which I saw, and then I think we have to come to the end already because our time is running. So, yeah, please, last question.
Thank you very much, dear speakers. And my question is, where do you see more potential for the fashion future, in the 3D modeling and digital design, or in vintage, second-hand, and so on?
Personally, for me, it's always a cocktail. I mean, we don't know that much about, 3D, but it's always, there's never one solution. We've gone way beyond the one. There's too many of us, and fashion is about individualism. So, I mean, I'll probably, be printing hair clips, but not shoes, and so the rest, it'll have to be vintage for me. But we need to be able to, stop ourselves from thinking that one thing will save us, because at the end of the day, it's always a multitude of things that we can each interpret and walk through that will bring other solutions. Multiple of voices, multiple people, multiple ideas.
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just following up on what Ursula said, I completely agree, and I think it's very contextual too. For example, I think there's a lot of places where you can expect to build different green economies by placing a 3D printer in a context where it doesn't work, where people don't know how to use the 3D printers, where people aren't familiar with the concept or don't necessarily want to and have their own type of innovative solutions. So again, it's one part of the problem, but I don't necessarily think it's, like Ursula said, the whole solution, because I think we can also look at solutions of like indigenous knowledge systems.
Exactly.
Or decolonizing the notions of technology is a huge start to opening lots of opportunities to explore how to mitigate the effects of the industry. So I definitely think there's a lot there, and there could be beautiful things that come out of it, but it's not, from my context, it's not the number one focus, nor is it the number 2 or number 3 focus.
Yeah, so do you want to wrap it up and say some last words?
Maybe when I think about the future of sustainable fashion and what could really move the needle, I think really transparency and access to information and reliable information, because nowadays we have so much greenwashing and so many misconceptions also built by us, by the sustainable fashion community. Also regulation. I have a lot of hope once we have stricter laws and fashion industry is forced to write down how much water the garment used and is forced to write down how you should actually recycle the garment. I think this is where we can see the change, and definitely here technology can help, because if we have transparency and if we have access to information, then it will be more and more difficult for us as consumers to turn our eye away.
Yeah, true. Carsten, some last words, then we close the the talk.
I'm all in from the transparency because I think this, what I said earlier, that there's no feedback in the system of design, that we need to, well, customers need to know how long this product lasts, and this longevity, I think, is a very important thing that needs to be, well, it needs to be implemented, so that's important to me.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. It was so inspiring listening to your projects, to the links to technology, and also being here with you face to face and not just digital. It was really a pleasure. Thank you so much.